The message that landed on the desk of Oberst Walter Weber, commander of Night Fighter Wing 2, did not use the word defeat. German military lexicon simply did not permit it. Instead, it used sterile terms like statistical anomaly, unacceptable loss ratio, and tactical incoherence. The message arrived at 2:00 a.m. on a cold November night in 1940. Weber, a decorated veteran who had helped craft the doctrine of blitzkrieg air support, read the summary 3 times. His pilots, flying the fearsome Messerschmitt Bf-110 night fighters, the best nocturnal interceptors in the world, were tasked with destroying the small sporadic raids of British bombers attempting to hit targets in the Ruhr Valley. Since the cessation of large-scale day raids, the report stated, British night bomber losses have trended towards 0.8% per sortie. This is mathematically and technically impossible. Weber stared at the figures. For a bomber campaign to be effective, losses must remain below 5%. The British were flying hundreds of missions, taking a handful of losses, while German night fighter crews, the elite of the Luftwaffe, were losing 1 in every 10 interceptors. The mathematics of air warfare demanded that after 4 months of continuous operations, the RAF's night bombing force should have been annihilated. Yet here was evidence that the British were not only flying, but doing so with near impunity. Weber felt a chilling wave of recognition. It was not the number of British losses that mattered. It was the nature of the German losses. His best pilots, the Nachtjagd aces with dozens of kills, were simply vanishing. They were not being shot down in dogfights. They were being intercepted by opponents they never saw, destroyed by bursts of fire from seemingly empty darkness. Weber knew the terrifying truth. The British had found something, or built something, that made their pilots omniscient in the night sky. The pilots of these ghost planes were not flying by instinct or courage. They were flying by a higher order, unseen and unfathomable knowledge. This was not a failure of Kampfgeist, fighting spirit. It was a failure of physics. The report, red-stamped and marked Führer Sache, Führer Matter, crossed Adolf Hitler's desk 2 days later. He had just emerged from the devastating failure to achieve air superiority during the Battle of Britain. Now his pride, his ideology, was facing a second, deeper, more insidious defeat. The British were supposed to be clinging to survival by guts alone. Guts Hitler could respect, even crush. But systematic technological superiority that defied the foundational belief in Aryan intellect was a betrayal of reality itself. Impossible, Hitler muttered. The British are a race of shopkeepers, not engineers. Goering promised me these night raids were manageable. What Hitler refused to accept, and what would become the most zealously guarded secret of the war's opening phase, was the depth of the British advantage. It was not just a plane or a bomb site. It was a revolutionary system of ground-controlled interception, a highly coordinated network of radar stations, control rooms, and dedicated human operators that turned every individual RAF pilot into the lethal unseen extension of a massive pre-calculating supermachine. The story of what happened next, the Führer's furious denial, the desperate technological scramble, and the shocking ideological pivot he made to avoid facing the truth of British technical brilliance, would fundamentally alter the direction of World War II. Hauptmann Klaus Richter, an ace with 27 confirmed kills, felt a cold knot tighten in his gut as he flew his Bf-110 over the blacked-out North Sea. His 2-man crew, himself and his radio operator, were the ultimate hunters, trained to use minimal ambient light and instinct to close with the lumbering British bombers. Tonight, the target was a column of Vickers Wellingtons heading for Hamburg. They were slow, noisy, and according to pre-war models, easy prey. Yet Richter was hunting a ghost. "Achtung, Klaus!" His radio operator, Feldwebel Haas, hissed, his voice tight. "Contact! Dead ahead, range 800 meters, speed closing quickly, too fast for a bomber." Richter scanned the night sky, his eyes straining. Nothing. The sky was ink, save for the scattered stars. Haas, that must be friendly. We're deep into the patrol area. No, sir. The signal is sharp, high frequency, not our equipment. Haas's voice cracked. Wait! It's turning with us. It knows our path. A blinding staccato series of explosions erupted 30 meters off Richter's starboard wing. Tracer fire, unnervingly accurate, walked right where his Bf-110 would have been in 2 seconds. The attacker was firing not at his current position, but at his anticipated position. Richter slammed the stick over, diving violently to break the engagement. His aircraft shuddered. The G-forces pressed him deep into his seat. He looked frantically behind him, then above. Still nothing. The British fighter had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, melting back into the darkness. Haas, visual. Did you see it? Spitfire? Hurricane? Negative visual, Hauptmann. But the attack angle, the speed, it was a textbook perfect interception. Too perfect. No human in a single cockpit could make that calculation that fast in this light. It was calculated. Richter leveled out, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The experience was not one of being outfought, but of being hunted by a superior intelligence. The British pilots were not brave cowboys. They were executing pre-programmed maneuvers with impossible precision. Richter, a man who lived and died by intuition, felt obsolete, a mere fleshy obstacle to a relentless equation. He spent the entire flight back to Amsterdam, checking his tail, feeling the cold, clinical eyes of an invisible enemy watching his every move. His faith in the immutable superiority of German pilot training, the pillar of his life, was dissolving into static. Meanwhile, 400 miles away, in a deep reinforced bunker beneath an RAF airbase near the Thames estuary, squadron leader Evelyn Reed watched the glowing green sweep of her radar screen. She was the human mind Richter could not comprehend. Evelyn spoke calmly into her throat microphone. Nightjar 070. Vector now. Enemy speed 320 knots. Target is braking right. Intercept in 3 seconds. Fire when ready. Her voice was steady, methodical, a cool counterpoint to the distant roar of a hurricane's engine. She was not relying on eyesight. She was relying on the brilliant minds, many of them women and civil servants Hitler dismissed as weak, who had engineered the GCI network. This silent subterranean war of intellect was one the Luftwaffe was losing decisively. The entire defense of Britain now rested on the calm analysis of flickering light on a cathode ray tube, a reality that defied every tenet of the Nazi cult of the individual warrior. Back at the Luftwaffe base near Amsterdam, Richter filed his report. He did not use the official boilerplate. He wrote what he felt. The enemy night fighters are not operating as independent entities. They are functioning as coordinated terminals within a large calculating apparatus. We are not fighting pilots. We are fighting a system. Wever understood immediately. The British system was removing the variables of human error, panic, and visual limits from the equation. The enemy was using technology to achieve what Hitler's ideology promised only the German mind could: total command and control. This specific report, detailing the systemic, non-visual nature of the British attacks, was the one that truly enraged Hitler. It confirmed that the failure was not a momentary lapse, but a fundamental intellectual gap. The meeting in the Wolf's Lair, early February 1941, was not a strategic review, it was an ideological trial. Hermann Goering, bloated and sweating, stood opposite a cold, contained Hitler. For Goering, the issue was survival. He knew the British had better radar, but he could not admit it without sacrificing his status as commander-in-chief. He prepared to defend the Luftwaffe on the grounds of raw courage and fighting spirit. Reichsmarschall, Hitler began, his voice dangerously low. I am informed that the night-air war, a matter of decisive importance for the morale of the British, is failing. Not due to a lack of aircraft, or fuel, or courage. but due to a network of towers and invisible rays. Radar, he spat the word as if it were a disease. Mein Führer, the British simply gained an early advantage in that specific area. We are accelerating our own research, the Freya system, the Würzburg radar, Goering stammered. Lies, Hitler roared, slamming his fist onto the map table, scattering markers. The Aryan race, the pinnacle of intellect and technological capacity, should not be following the British in anything. This failure is not a matter of timing. It is a matter of betrayal. Hitler paced, his eyes blazing, a nervous tic working at his jaw. The British victory in the skies over London was not won by the RAF alone. It was won by their cohesion, their ability to link every pilot, every airfield, every radar station into a singular, flexible command structure. This is what we call Germanic efficiency, and they have demonstrated it better than the Luftwaffe. The British mastery of GCI and radar contradicted the very foundation of the Nazi worldview, the belief that the rigid, hierarchical, and racially pure German system would always be scientifically and strategically superior. The RAF's success was proof of the intellectual and organizational capacity of the very decadent democracy Hitler sought to conquer. Goering was ushered out only to be recalled 3 days later, finding Hitler even more agitated. The intelligence reports continue, Goering. We have lost more aces this week than in the entire month of October. And the British? Their bomber losses remain static, a mockery of our resources. Explain this, or I will consider this evidence of the conspiracy I suspect. Goering, his face pale beneath his makeup, tried one last desperate appeal to military logic. Mein Führer, we are expending resources disproportionately. We must redeploy the night fighters to the French coast to intercept the bomber streams earlier, allowing us to use our Freya radar for early warning. We must accept the technological delay and use superior tactics. Hitler cut him off with a chilling laugh. Superior tactics? What superior tactics, Reichsmarschall, when the enemy can see your every move before you leave the ground? No, the answer is not tactics. The answer is that the German mind has been compromised. The scientific community failed me, and you, as the commander of the air arm, failed to see the rot. I want all major offensive aircraft production, the Messerschmitts, the bombers, curtailed and their resources diverted, Hitler commanded, shocking Goering into silence. We will implement a totally unprecedented technological pivot. You will gather every available scientist, physicist, and electrical engineer. Their sole mission is the development of active radar countermeasures, new passive detection systems, and high-speed jet propulsion technology. The only way to erase this British intellectual stain is to leapfrog them entirely. You will create a new Wunderwaffe to replace this outdated air force. Goering stared, aghast. Diverting resources from current production was a strategic gamble of immense proportion, betting the future on untested technology. He knew this order would destabilize the Luftwaffe for months, guaranteeing even higher losses now, but he dared not object. This order was the birth of the V-weapons program and the premature commitment to the Me-262 jet fighter, all rushed to production years before they were strategically sound, sacrificing the proven piston engine fighters that could have won the air war immediately. The RAF had, in effect, forced Germany to leapfrog itself into strategic chaos. If you are finding this story as gripping as we are, and you want to follow the extraordinary measures Hitler took to hide this truth, take a second to hit that subscribe button and give us a like. There is so much more to uncover here about the technological arms race they fought, and you will not want to miss what happens next. Hitler fixed Goering with a terrifying, paranoid gaze. And for the public, Reichsmarschall, the narrative must change. The British did not defeat the Luftwaffe. You will instruct Goebbels to disseminate a counter-narrative. The failure to crush Britain was not a British victory, but a consequence of sabotage and incompetence within the high command, a failure of leadership, not German inherent skill. You will deflect attention from their radar superiority and onto internal purges. The German people cannot, must not believe the British are smarter than we are. Goering understood. Hitler was sacrificing his closest ally's reputation and implicitly threatening his life to preserve the myth of Aryan supremacy. The accusations did not stop with Goering. Hitler immediately summoned his senior scientific advisors, men who had previously been lauded as the intellectual champions of the Reich. He demanded answers about why German radar, which had initially been superior, had lagged behind the British chain-home system. Dr. Emil Schuster, a respected physicist, nervously explained the British innovation. Mein Führer, the British utilized the frequency spectrum below 30 MHz for early warning. It is a lower, simpler frequency which provides extreme range, something our initial, more complex designs overlooked. Hitler slammed his fist down again. Simpler? You are telling me the decadent British achieved their superiority through simpler means than our own scientists? That is not an oversight, Dr. Schuster. That is treasonous incompetence, or worse, deliberate sabotage. This failure is a cancer planted by those who hate the Aryan mind. It is the influence of international Jewry on applied science. You have prioritized complexity and theory over practical, decisive victory. The scientists were dismissed under armed guard, their work placed under SS surveillance. The episode confirmed Hitler's bias. The only reason German technology could fail was if the purity of the German purpose was being subverted by internal enemies. This paranoia justified the massive, desperate technological pivot that followed. In the weeks that followed, the consequences of Hitler's ideological shock rippled through the Reich. Hundreds of scientists were pulled off long-term projects and thrown into the frantic pressure cooker environment of secret weapons development, attempting to create the technological counterpunch Hitler craved. Goering was tasked with achieving air superiority while simultaneously overseeing the transition to a Wunderwaffe that would, in effect, render his current fleet obsolete. He had to demonstrate competence while acknowledging the system's failure. To gather the essential data needed to counter the GCI network, Goering was forced to issue the most morally draining order of his career. We need their frequencies, we need their control patterns, and we need to know how they react to volume, Goering told his intelligence chief. This led to the most shocking military tactic of the period, the intentional sacrifice of reconnaissance squadrons. Small flights of specialist Me-110s and Ju-88s, fitted with rudimentary signal detection equipment, were sent deep into British airspace on suicide runs. Their mission was not to bomb, but to fly precise, predetermined patterns, provoking the GCI-guided RAF fighters and transmitting signal data until the moment of their destruction. The data collected from the final seconds of these doomed flights became the blueprint for German countermeasures. By May 1941, the truth was undeniable. The British air defense system was unbreakable by the forces Hitler currently possessed. The initial strategic goal, air superiority followed by Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, was dead. Hitler, faced with a military defeat that was fundamentally an ideological one, chose not to admit failure. He chose punishment and diversion. He ordered the strategic shift, abandoning the attempt to destroy the RAF and instead focused the Luftwaffe entirely on the Blitz, the terror bombing of British cities. This was not a military strategy. It was an admission of defeat in the skies, transformed into a psychological attack on the civilian population. The shock of this pivot was the admission that the German military machine could not win a conventional, intellectual battle against the British. The RAF pilots, flying in the dark, directed by unseen radar operators and mathematicians, had forced the Führer to admit that his primary Western objective was unattainable, and this failure had profound global consequences. Instead of occupying Britain, Hitler now had vast, uncommitted air resources that were consuming fuel, time, and attention. The failure to secure the English Channel meant he had to maintain a massive defensive force against the constant threat of Allied invasion. This strategic block in the West, caused by the systemic excellence of the RAF's GCI defenses, created an unbearable pressure point. Unable to defeat Britain and desperate to secure the resources needed to fuel his Wunderwaffe ambitions, Hitler made his final, most catastrophic pivot, Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. The goal was no longer merely continental conquest. It was a frenzied grab for the oil and resources needed to fund the desperate technological race the RAF had forced upon him. The British pilots did not just win a battle. By proving their technological and organizational superiority over the Luftwaffe, they forced Hitler to turn east, overextend his forces, and begin the conflict that would ultimately drain the Third Reich of its blood and resources. The British RAF did not just win the Battle of Britain. They fundamentally altered Hitler's entire strategic course for the war, leading directly to the ultimate collapse of his empire.